This video is to demonstrate the Vanamatic feature available from the Vanlock company. The Vanamatic feature is a unique system that allows users to change combinations in the field should a key become lost, stolen, or otherwise compromised. Each series has 8 unique codes programmed into the locks. Each code corresponds to a key color. For example, and for purposes of this demonstration, you will see that we have a red dot key and a white dot key. The red is the first color in a series, the white is the second color in a series. Unless otherwise specified, all locks will come from our factory set on the number 1 red code. The black dot change keys seen to the right are what allow us to change from one combination to another. For this demonstration, we've installed a Vanlock plug lock or lock cylinder into a typical T-handle application. Currently, this lock is set on the number 1 red code. Should that red key become compromised and we need to switch the lock from the red code to the white code, we will utilize our change keys. Change keys have a black dot and are stamped with the code that they correspond to. For this key, you will see that it has a black dot and a number 1. The number 1 corresponds to the red number 1 code. To change this lock from the existing 1 code to the number 2 code, I will insert the change key into the lock and turn the lock a quarter turn to the right, thus moving the lock and the opening or the gap space on the lock from the 12 o'clock position to the 3 o'clock position. So I will be turning the lock 90 degrees to the right. I will insert the number 1 change key, turn the lock a quarter turn to the right. This puts the lock into a neutral setting. I can now set the lock to any of the other 7 remaining codes. Again, for demonstration purposes, I only have 2 sets of keys in front of me. So I will take the number 2 change key and insert it into the lock. I will insert it at the 3 o'clock position, so I'm essentially inserting the key sideways or 90 degrees to the right, and I will turn the lock so that the empty space or the gap in the pins goes from the 3 o'clock position to the 12 o'clock position. You will now see this gap is at 12 o'clock. That means I have now set the lock to the number 2 white combination. The number 2 white key is now the new operating key to the lock, and that red key, which was lost or stolen, is now locked out of the system. Again, the white key is now the new operating key. Once I've changed to a specific code, in this case the white code, I can change it to any other code in the lock, including the red code that I just changed from. I will make that change so that you can see the system perform again and to provide a few hints and tips for the change process. I'm now, keep in mind, on the white number 2 setting, so I will take my black number 2 change key, put it into the lock, and turn it a quarter turn. You will note that the pins on the lock are flush with the face of the lock. The one exception being potentially the pin at the top of the lock. That is okay for it to be slightly depressed. However, you want to be sure that none of the other pins of this lock remain depressed during the change process. By depressed, I mean you do not want your lock to look like that, with many pins retained into the lock. The change key allows you to remove it in any position. You want to be sure that you only remove it in the precise 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock positions. And the only sure way to know that you're doing that is to make sure that the pins are flush with the face of the lock, as they are here. If you attempt to change codes and move from one key to another and the pins remain depressed, you can potentially, and in all likelihood, you will jam the lock, rendering the lock useless. Once you've changed the codes a few times, you will have a feel for it and it will be very simple. However, do be aware, at least the first few times you change, to make sure that the pins are returning flush with the face of the lock. One thing you might also want to do, at least in the beginning, is if you're changing codes, to do it with the machine or the door open. That way, if the lock does become jammed, you are not locked out of your machine. Okay, so here we are in the neutral setting. We can set this lock for any other code. I'm going to set it so the number 1 red key will operate it again. I insert my number 1 black change key into the lock, turn it back from the 3 o'clock position to the 12 o'clock position. Now, my red number 1 key is the new operating key,